The man woke up paralyzed in the forest, horrified to find himself among wolves, and wondered how he got there. Hello, welcome. Like, subscribe, and turn on notifications, Sameo suggested, quickly grabbing 2 glasses and a bottle of wine from the cabinet. Yes, it wasn't easy, but Armando, we worked honestly to negotiate this, so it's a well-deserved victory, he added, still not believing they had managed such a successful deal. Yes, sighed Armando, looking at his deputy Sameo. There's one thing I don't understand. If they were ready to sign the contract from the beginning, all the theatrics were probably just to boost their own egos. Some people don't work directly, they want you to humiliate yourself and beg. It's absurd. Of course, but that's how things work, Sameo said. Armando Batista had been in the medium-sized business for over 70 years. His factory produced a range of garden tools with a decent product line that saw annual production increases. Everything was going well with small wholesalers, but dealing with large retail chains was another story. The negotiations took months and required significant effort. The richer the clients were, the more petty and capricious they became, complicating deals. Our professionalism, Sameo raised his glass. Armando, stop worrying. Everything's fine, Sameo reassured him. Sorry, I'm exhausted, sighed the director. I'm probably going home. Okay, agreed Sameo. I'll call you if anything urgent comes up. Armando made a round of the workshops, and after ensuring everything was in order, he headed to his car. Claudia, are you home? He called his wife. I'll be home early today, Armando. My mother and I are downtown, we decided to take a stroll around the city, replied his wife. See you tonight. Armando looked at the clock, it was just past 3. He sighed, wishing he could escape everything and spend the rest of the day with Claudia, but she was out again. Upon entering his yard, he noticed his gardener busy mowing the lawn. Hi, greeted the owner. Is everything okay? Good afternoon, Señor Batista, the elderly man smiled widely. You arrived early today. Yes, I need to rest, Armando replied. Why are you still here? He glanced at the clock. Well, Mrs. Beatriz wasn't happy with the way I mowed the lawn, she made me redo it. Don't take it personally, Armando said, strolling through the garden. She always causes trouble for everyone. Go home, I'll talk to her. The elderly man took his lawnmower and walked toward the utility house. Armando watched him leave. Mrs. Beatriz had been a thorn in his side for years. His mother-in-law was never easy to get along with, she always wanted things her way, with no consideration for others. Armando prepared a fragrant tea and retreated to his office. The house was quiet, with only the cook preparing dinner in the kitchen. How I'd love to forget everything, Armando said aloud. I'm so exhausted. He rested his head on the table. However, his brief rest was interrupted by a knock on the door. After about 5 minutes, startled, Armando smoothed his disheveled hair and said, "Come in." "Mr. Batista, I forgot to ask what we should do with the fish you brought," said the anxious cook. "Mrs. Beatriz had a fit this morning. She told us to throw it away." "Huh?" Armando was perplexed. "It's fresh, I got it yesterday." "I know," the cook replied curtly. "But she said the whole house now smells like fish." "Rogerio, please cook the fish for dinner," Armando asked. I would love to. As for Sarah Jane, she can eat whatever she prefers, I don't mind. Around 7 p.m., faint noises began emanating from downstairs, escalating into the shrill complaints of his mother-in-law. I told you to throw away that stinking fish, she screamed. Now the whole house smells of it. What's wrong? Armando asked as he came downstairs to the living room. I asked Rogerio to cook fish for dinner, Armando said. Armando, you know I can't stand the smell of fish. Sarah Jane wrinkled her nose, looking like she might vomit. Yes, dear, you're acting like a child. His wife also looked at him unhappily. It's funny how when your mother orders fish in a restaurant, it's fine, Armando grumbled. But when I come back from fishing, she can't wait to throw my fish away. But she doesn't stay in the restaurant kitchen where the fish is fried, Claudia said disapprovingly. You should talk to my mother. Armando didn't respond, realizing he would have his dinner with the cook in the kitchen. Rogerio, thank you from the bottom of my heart, he told him 30 minutes later after finishing his meal. The fish was delicious. After chatting a bit more with the man, Armando went upstairs to his bedroom, glancing into his wife's room. On his way, he couldn't understand how it had come to this, but he and his wife now had separate rooms. Claudia had insisted on it over time, saying she couldn't sleep with someone else in the room. Claudia, how are you? Armando asked. What did you do today? He tried to embrace his wife, but she pulled away. You don't love my mother, she pouted. You always yell at her. Are you serious? The husband intervened, surprised. When I yelled at her, she didn't answer but remained silent. After waiting a bit, Armando retreated to his own room. This is a normal family life, he murmured to himself. She has her own room, and I have mine. Sometimes I think it would have been better if I hadn't married. The man lay on his bed and closed his eyes, recalling his past. Armando Batista was in the middle of a large hall. The presentation had finished, and he was discussing with a businessman who ran 3 garden stores and was interested in wholesale purchases. Yes, I'm satisfied with your terms, said the businessman. I'll come next week with my assistant on Wednesday. On that Wednesday, a familiar man appeared in Armando's office, accompanied by an attractive woman. Mr. Batista, this is Claudia, my assistant, the businessman introduced her. During the contract discussion, Armando found himself looking at Claudia several times, though she seemed not to notice. Well, I suggest we finish our meeting with lunch at a nice place, said the businessman. When the business was concluded, the businessman agreed, and everyone headed to the nearest restaurant. After lunch, Armando was even more interested in Claudia, and to his delight, a few days later, the businessman sent Armando some documents. Armando took the opportunity to get to know the woman better. Can I invite you to lunch? Armando asked timidly. Please don't refuse me. However, Claudia declined, explaining she needed to return to work. How about the weekend? Armando asked, looking her directly in the eyes. We won't talk business, just a friendly meeting. Claudia hesitated. Armando didn't know what was on her mind, but to his joy, she agreed to the weekend coffee meeting. Armando asked her what she did outside of work. I won't lie, work consumes all my time, Claudia sighed. I live with my sick mother, and I need to work hard to support us both. What's wrong with her? Armando asked. It's serious. She's in the hospital with a thyroid problem, Claudia answered. She depends on expensive medication. I'm so sorry, Armando sighed. Is there anything I can do to help? What could you do for me? She retorted with irritation in her voice. If I could find a better paying job, I would have left my secretary position a long time ago. Not only is the salary low, but it also drains my energy. I understand, Armando sighed. There usually isn't a perfect job. Problems exist everywhere. After comforting Claudia, Armando considered how he could help her and thought about offering her a position in his company. However, they didn't follow that path. After the initial meeting, they had more meetings, but before long, Armando found himself in love with Claudia. He wondered what attracted him to her. Was it her efficiency or perhaps her distant demeanor? She didn't flirt with him, didn't give hints, and didn't seem to care. After 2 months of dating, Armando confessed his love for her. Claudia was extremely disturbed and didn't respond immediately, asking him to wait 2 weeks. For those 2 weeks, Armando lived in agony. When Claudia finally called to say yes, he felt like the happiest man on earth. Armando, but you need to meet my mother, Claudia said. I've already told her we're in a serious relationship. I don't mind, he agreed. Let me invite both of you to dinner at my house. I'll arrange everything. It will be better than the most expensive restaurant. Armando was very concerned, understanding that his life likely depended on this meeting. However, he didn't like Sarah Jane from their first meeting. She behaved arrogantly and somewhat condescendingly. What a wonderful house you have, Sarah Jane said, looking around with enthusiasm. You can be envied, unlike me and Claudia, who live in a one-room apartment. If I could work, maybe we could buy a house, but my poor girl has to work so hard to support us both. As for Claudia, she remained silent for most of the evening. It seemed to Armando that she was deep in thought. Claudia, is something wrong? He asked, finally unable to contain his anxiety. You seem very worried. Yes, I've had some difficulties at work, she said calmly. There's some paperwork to sort out. I'm sorry. I want so much to forget everything, but nothing works. Yes, work consumes so much time and energy. That's why I decided long ago that my wife wouldn't work, Armando said. That's very commendable, Claudia's mother said. Only truly loving husbands can respect their wives this way. Claudia blushed, but after the meeting, Armando decided she would become his wife. The wedding was held with great pomp. On the bride's side were only her mother and a few friends. Afterward, Claudia and her mother moved into Armando's house. Armando immediately asked his wife not to work, and this initially caused many disagreements. Armando, I can't just stay within these 4 walls, Claudia protested. If you don't want me to work, at least let me do volunteer work. And what would you do? Armando questioned. There are many things you can do, she objected. I could organize parties for sick children, buy gifts and clothes, even sponsor some families and offer support. If that's what you want, Armando conceded. All right. Just tell me how much money you'll need per month. I've already calculated, Claudia replied, and Armando looked at her perplexed. What did you expect? She asked, noting his surprise. Stores won't give me anything for free. All right, sighed the man. If that makes you happy, we'll do it. Claudia, radiant, hugged him tightly. Thus, she started a small charity foundation and spent most of her days working, rarely being at home. In the first months, Armando was happy, but then Sarah Jane took over the household chores, and the house was constantly filled with her discontented voice. Armando tried to talk to her, but she immediately fell ill, and after that, Claudia created a scene for Armando. "Armando, you know she has thyroid problems," his wife reprimanded him. "She has an emotional background, so sometimes she loses her temper, but she doesn't scream like a madwoman, she just makes remarks to the employees." For a year, Armando let everything happen, but then one day his mother-in-law fired the maid for a reason known only to her. Armando sighed but didn't intervene. 3 days later, he was in his office when he heard voices downstairs. Sarah Jane was speaking unpleasantly with a stranger, a woman who looked to be between 27 and 30 years old. "If you're not willing to stay after hours and correct your mistakes," Sarah Jane said, "you're not suitable for us. I take my work seriously, I know my job and have experience." "Why do you think I'd be bad at cleaning?" the woman responded timidly. "Because for the salary I offer, everything must be perfect," Sarah Jane said angrily, gesturing for the visitor to leave the house. The woman hesitated for a few seconds, holding her bag, and then headed for the front door. "Wait a minute, you're hired," Armando said loudly, staring at his mother-in-law. "I'm the owner here." Sarah Jane wanted to protest, but fear held her back. Her face turned red with anger as it boiled inside her. "There will be no overtime for you," Armando assured. "The poor woman, even if she makes mistakes, it's not a problem. I won't make her work late." "Armando, don't you see that this person isn't suitable for us?" his mother-in-law finally shouted. "I'm better at managing the house than you." Ignoring his mother-in-law, Armando asked the visitor, "What's your name?" "Anna," the woman replied timidly. "I have references. I worked as a maid for 3 years. If you're ready, you can start today," Armando said calmly. Before leaving the room, Sarah Jane looked at Anna with so much hatred that the woman shivered. "Anna, the cook advised you on that day. Armando is a good man, his mother-in-law is difficult, but if he hired you personally, you have nothing to fear," Anna was told. The next day, Sarah Jane gesticulated arrogantly around the room and said, "Yesterday, you cleaned the living room poorly." Anna looked at her, perplexed. That day, Sarah Jane kept trying to wear her down so she wouldn't return to work the next day. Of course, such thoughts began to appear in Anna's mind, but that morning, before her meeting with Sarah Jane, she met Armando in the hallway, and he gave her the strength to continue her work in peace. "Anna, don't worry about what Sarah Jane wants," Armando advised before leaving. "I hired you, so I'm responsible for you. Don't be afraid of her." During lunch, the housewife deliberately spilled tea on the carpet and made a scene. "The stain wasn't here 10 minutes ago, you did it now," Sarah Jane said. Anna replied calmly, "How dare you accuse me?" Sarah Jane screamed, "You're nobody here." Anna didn't respond. Instead, she began to clean the stain while the woman continued to yell. Nearly 2 years passed, and Sarah Jane couldn't fire anyone since that incident. Meanwhile, Armando felt a pang of shame for his inner discontent. He enjoyed all the privileges one could only dream of. Moreover, Claudia proved to be very calm and intelligent, rarely arguing with him. Armando often took her to various events and heard complimentary comments about her. Señor Batista, your wife is divine. For a woman like that, any man would move mountains, commented a partner. But Claudia never gave Armando any reason to doubt her. Their only disagreements arose because of her mother, but Armando eventually stopped paying attention to that. The only concern he had was the absence of children. Armando, don't panic, it's not the right time yet, his wife used to assure him. Once such thoughts began to occupy Armando's mind, he finally fell into restless sleep, tossing and turning and waking up several times. When will I finally get to sleep? He muttered. In the morning, it was one of the rare days they had breakfast together as a family, as Claudia was usually still asleep when her husband left for work. How about we go out this weekend? Armando suggested. It's been a while since we went out. Sure, Claudia agreed. Let's try karting. I've been a few times and really enjoyed it. Do you want to go karting? Armando asked, surprised. Ah, well, I don't mind, Sarah Jane said. Are you joining us? God forbid, she refused, waving her hands dismissively. Don't even try to persuade me. All right then, just the two of us will compete against each other, Claudia laughed. Armando looked forward to the karting trip. Claudia asked him to rent the entire track for an hour to avoid interruptions, and Armando agreed with pleasure. As they drove out of the city in the warm September weather, both were excited, rubbing their hands in anticipation. And what prize do I get if I beat you? Armando asked with shining eyes. You'll fulfill any one of my requests, Claudia replied. But first, try to beat me. I'm confident you won't be able to. Upon arrival, Armando parked the car and joined his wife towards the empty track. Soon, a young man approached them. This is for you, Mr. Batista, he said, pointing to one of the carts, and this pink one is for your wife. Armando quickly got into the cart, responding, watch what I'll do. I'm definitely going to beat you. Claudia and Armando started their carts simultaneously, with Armando giving Claudia a slight advantage. She took her time, not wanting to drive at high speed. They completed a few laps this way until Armando began to accelerate, eventually catching up with Claudia and overtaking her on a curve. Claudia tried to regain the lead. Armando didn't even realize what happened next, he just felt the cart stop responding. After a moment, he felt a spin, then another, and the cart collided with the tires, pushing them forward. Everything was spinning before Armando's eyes. He tried to get out of the cart but couldn't move. He could hear voices around him. Everything went blurry before he lost consciousness. 20 minutes later, an ambulance arrived and he was taken to the hospital. His wife was frantic with the doctors, crying and asking, will he survive? Armando heard someone ask. He couldn't even open his eyes, his body felt lifeless. I don't know yet, the doctor replied. We're doing everything we can. Armando had a vague recollection of what happened next. He was drifting in and out of consciousness, hearing murmurs of nearby voices. He had overcorrected and lost control. Claudia's voice echoed. 3 days later, Armando finally regained consciousness. He was alone. He moved his lips, calling out to a woman in a white coat who approached him. What happened to me? He asked the doctor, struggling. My wife and I were karting, he said. Unfortunately, you had an accident, the doctor replied. It's rare, but you were lucky, it could have been fatal. When can I leave? I want to stand up, Armando asked. I don't think you'll be able to feel your legs, the doctor sighed. It's unlikely that you'll be able to walk. Be grateful you're alive. None of us could guarantee that in the beginning. Armando remained silent, looking pleadingly at the doctor as tears streamed down his face. That night, Claudia arrived, already aware of his situation and crying incessantly. Forgive me, it's all my fault, she sobbed. Why did I suggest we go there? Claudia, it's not your fault, her husband reassured her. I was the one who accelerated. It's all my fault. Nevertheless, Claudia was inconsolable, seeming to be on the brink of hysteria. Armando felt uncomfortable. He didn't want to see anyone or witness Claudia's hysterical outbursts. While still in the hospital, Armando resumed work. His deputy, Sameo, visited him, and they discussed as many work issues as possible. Armando was released from the hospital after 2 months and began a new chapter in his life. He didn't plan to leave his job and hired a reliable driver to take him to the factory. Working in a wheelchair was challenging, but Armando persevered. The office was equipped with ramps for him to move independently in his wheelchair. An assistant was always present to help with daily tasks. Armando hated being the object of pity and was deeply hurt by sympathetic glances. Sameo, he once told his deputy, I'm not a helpless creature. I'll handle this. I will never give up on my job. Changes were also happening at Armando's house. His wife began to distance herself. Armando, let's try going abroad for rehabilitation, she once suggested. Claudia, that won't help me, he replied. I will never walk again, and we need to learn to live with it. His mother-in-law became increasingly quiet around him. It seemed that neither his wife nor his mother-in-law knew what to do next. Anna, he once asked his maid, I need your help during the day. I can't go to work every day, so I need someone reliable at home. You've been with us for years, and I trust you completely. I'll find someone else for cleaning. All right, Mr. Batista, the woman smiled. Just explain what I need to do. Soon my house will be fully accessible for a wheelchair, and then I'll need an attendant and an assistant, Armando explained. The responsibilities are the same as for any care for a wheelchair-bound man. I'm sorry, but I can't ask anyone else for this job. The woman agreed and immediately began her new duties. Sarah Jane, Anna hasn't vacuumed the living room yet, Sarah Jane complained when the former maid came down from the second floor. Sorry, but Mr. Batista hired me as his assistant, Anna replied calmly. I no longer work as a cleaner, she added, blushing. You've been a headache, Sarah Jane hissed like a snake. I would have fired you a long time ago. Anna didn't respond. Instead, she went to the kitchen to prepare tea for her employer while Armando's mother-in-law watched her with a discontented look. Months passed since the accident, and Armando began to notice that his wife was distancing herself, even though she had closed her foundation, continued to sponsor various families, and spent her nights working. Claudia, we haven't talked in a long time, Armando said one night. Is something wrong? Armando, I still can't forgive myself, she cried. When I look at you, I don't want to live. Claudia, dear, you should be happy I'm alive, Armando said gently. I missed you so much. He took her hand and went to his bedroom. The woman kissed her husband without much enthusiasm, and Armando felt it. This made him feel even more pain, and he told himself he wouldn't insist on intimacy anymore, but deep down, he wished Claudia's love wouldn't just fade because he was confined to a wheelchair but would also be renewed with vigor. Armando didn't understand where he drew so much moral strength. Instead of crying, he smiled when he had a strong inner desire to give up everything and end his life. He was starting a new venture. "Anna, why don't we take a trip to a museum?" Armando suggested to his assistant one day. "I'd like to go to the Paleontology Museum." "All right," Anna smiled enthusiastically. "Frankly, I've never been there. It's definitely something we need to do." "I'm sure you'll love it," the man smiled. On Saturday, the driver took Armando and his assistant to the museum. Despite it being a weekend, the museum wasn't crowded. Most people seemed eager to enter the dinosaur hall. Seeing Anna's surprised expression, Armando laughed and asked, "What do you think? Look at that giant." "Honestly, I'm relieved we didn't live in their time," Anna replied with pale lips. "If I saw that in person, I might go crazy." "Well, not all of them were predators," Armando countered. "Many were herbivores. We might have ended up in their stomachs like unnoticed insects on plant leaves, but I don't think we'd be hunted. There were vast forests, they had plenty of food." For nearly 3 hours, they examined the museum's most fascinating exhibits, with Armando providing commentary throughout. Later, on the way home, the man exclaimed, "What a fantastic day off. It might sound strange, but only when I was confined to a wheelchair did I begin to value life, every moment of it. Now I'm less afraid of losing anything." Anna smiled, reflecting on her simple life. She lived in a rented apartment, and her salary was divided in half, one part for her parents and the other for her own expenses. Essentially, she had nothing to lose. When they arrived home in good spirits, Claudia was already there, and Armando approached his wife. "Dear, I'd like to invite you to a romantic dinner," he said, slightly anxious. "Why?" Claudia looked at him surprised, waiting for more explanation. "I'll book a suite at a luxury hotel and arrange a romantic evening for us," he said, hopeful. "I thought it would be nice to spend the night out." "All right," Claudia smiled. "Let's consider it a date. I'll go to the hotel, and you wait for me there with flowers." Armando took his wife's hand. "I love you. I promise you won't regret it." He spent most of the night worried, full of expectation because he had waited so long for Claudia to finally accept what happened and return her love for him. "I'll order a huge bouquet of red roses," Armando planned. "We'll have champagne and fruit in the room." In the morning, he fell asleep and dreamed of Claudia holding roses. He woke up around 11 a.m. and rang the bell. Anna entered his room, noticed Armando's worried expression, and asked anxiously, "Is something wrong? Can I help?" "Yes," Armando replied immediately. "Anna, please order a huge bouquet of red roses and prepare some clothes for a restaurant. We're going somewhere today." "You have an appointment?" Anna asked with a smile. "I have a romantic dinner with my wife tonight," Armando said happily. "Anna, can I ask one more thing? I'm meeting my driver today, could you accompany me by taxi to the hotel?" "Of course, I will go with you," Anna agreed. "Don't worry, I'll take care of everything," Anna assured him. However, Armando was very nervous and restless. At 6 p.m., He and Anna took a taxi, agreeing that he would go to the hotel earlier and wait for her there. She was expected to arrive around 8 p.m. In the room, Anna helped Armando settle in, put the flowers in water, and ensured everything was in order. She said goodbye to her host and left. "See you tomorrow, Señor Batista," she said before leaving. The woman exited the beautiful hotel building and looked up. Somewhere up there was Armando. Near the hotel, there was a small cafe, and Anna decided to have a cup of tea. She enjoyed her favorite pastries with cream when she suddenly noticed Claudia's car parked 300 meters from the hotel. At that moment, Claudia and an unknown man got out of the car. After a brief conversation, she kissed the stranger. Anna, stunned, watched as another car approached and the man got in. Claudia waved towards the car and then entered the hotel. Who was that? Anna's heart raced. Judging by the kiss, he wasn't just a friend. Confused and worried, Anna's thoughts turned to Armando. He was a kind man who had never harmed anyone, and she felt a duty to protect him. A sense of imminent danger hovered over her. The cafe was open until 3 a.m., and Anna ended up drinking about 10 cups of tea throughout the night, struggling to stay awake despite her fatigue. Her intuition of danger kept her alert. Around 3 a.m., she saw Claudia hastily leaving the hotel, getting into her car, and driving away. And where is Armando? The caretaker couldn't help but wonder as she began to gather her belongings. The front door of the hotel opened, and the doorman helped Armando out onto the street. Anna sighed with relief, quickly dressing as she walked. A few meters from the cafe's exit, she saw a car rapidly approaching the hotel. Two men quickly jumped out, put Armando in the car, and drove off. "Stop!" Anna shouted at the departing car, but it was too far away, and it was quite dark outside. "What am I going to do?" she said to herself, almost crying out of helplessness. At that moment, a taxi stopped in front of the hotel, and Anna immediately ran toward it. "Please, let's go," she begged. "I'll pay double the fare." The driver initially hesitated but yielded upon hearing the amount she offered. "We need to find a black SUV," Anna instructed. "Let's head to the main road. I'm sure they left the city." Her intuition was right, and soon they spotted the familiar car. Anna asked the driver to keep his distance. They drove for about an hour, and then the SUV turned off the road. "There's a forest here," the taxi driver responded to Anna's request to follow the SUV. "There's no road, just a dirt path." Anna didn't know which was more frightening, the dark forest and wolves or the possibility of finding her employer dead. She crawled carefully through the first rows of trees until she reached the dirt path where the black Land Rover had turned. She hid among large bushes. 20 minutes later, she saw the car return to the road and drive back to the city. Who are these people? What did they do to him? Anna navigated cautiously through the bushes. Her legs trembled as the sound of wolves howling filled the air, but an inner certainty that Armando was alive pushed her forward despite the fear. "Lord, help me," Anna whispered. "Please help me find him. Armando. Armando," she called out as loudly as she could. "Where are you?" But there was only silence in response. Tears streamed down her cheeks as she received no answer. She started peeking through the bushes when she noticed an area where the branches were bent to the ground. With trembling legs, she moved in that direction as the howling of the wolves grew louder. "Armando," she screamed at the top of her voice. "Where are you? Please answer me." After about 5 minutes, she reached a small clearing. The area was clearer, and she could see the sharp outlines of the trees. Something was lying near one of them. "Armando," she shouted, rushing forward. "Please hold on. I'm coming." She clung to the branches of the bushes for support and crawled to a wheelchair next to which a man was lying. He was staring up with lifeless eyes. Instinctively, she grabbed her phone. Initially, Anna wanted to call the police and an ambulance. Besides that, she needed to inform his wife. "I don't even know where we are, so I need to take him to the hospital first." Anna struggled to get up, and after some effort, she managed to place Armando in her coat and drag him to the road, where she managed to stop a car. The driver helped carry Armando into the car and took them to the nearest hospital. The doctor examined Armando immediately. Although there were no visible signs of violence, his weak heartbeat indicated that he had been drugged. Miraculously, Armando survived, regaining consciousness 3 days later. During those days, Anna was anxious. It was strange that none of Armando's relatives had contacted her. So she called the cook. "Anna, none of the owners are at home. 3 days ago, Mrs. Beatrice fell ill and was taken to a private clinic. Claudia has been with her since then. I don't know where Mr. Batista is. They gave me a week off." After hanging up, Anna realized she would have to wait for Armando to regain his senses and start communicating properly before things became clearer. "Anna, what are you doing here? Where am I?" Armando asked, looking around. "I'm in the hospital." "Yes, Señor Batista. What happened to you?" She stared at his eyes. "Do you remember being kidnapped?" Perplexed, Armando looked at Anna as if trying to recall. When he finally remembered, he shuddered. "Anna, I left the hotel and was waiting for a taxi when someone pulled me into a car. I felt a sting, and everything after that was like a dream," Armando said, his face covered in sweat. "Did you see these people?" Anna asked softly, trying not to attract attention. "Do you know them?" "No," Armando answered thoughtfully, paling. "I believe they intended to kill me in the forest," Anna began. "There were wolves present. It's possible they planned for the wolves to devour you, ensuring that no one would ever find out how you ended up there." "Anna, how did you find me?" Armando asked, surprised. "I'm only just beginning to understand the meaning of your words." "I'm sorry, but I followed you," Anna admitted, lowering her head. "After leaving the hotel, I decided to have tea at the cafe across the street. I was very tired that day, but when I saw your wife arrive, and not alone, I feared for you." "Not alone? What do you mean?" He stared intently into Anna's eyes. "I won't lie. There was a man with her." "I didn't see his face," the woman replied, "but I can assure you that they were kissing. Then a car approached, and the man got in." "Anna, are you sure?" Armando asked, horrified. "Maybe you imagined it all." "See," she lowered her eyes timidly. "My wife and I had a wonderful romantic night. We planned to return home in the morning, but my mother-in-law called at 4 a.m., saying she was literally dying. Claudia left immediately to go straight home, not wasting any time with me. I had to call a taxi and return alone. You know the rest. Anna sighed and told her boss what she had learned from his cook. I think someone intended to kill you, the woman said, holding his hand. Senor Batista, it's dangerous for you to go home now. Let's keep your survival a secret for a while and see how things develop. Someone will eventually reveal themselves. If they find you, they may not spare your life this time. My God, I can't understand why, murmured Armando. I haven't harmed anyone. Why would someone want to kill me in such a cruel way? This is absurd. Senor Batista, did you know that Claudia was seeing someone? Anna suddenly asked. Anna, I'm sorry, but I still believe you're mistaken, the man analyzed. Just because she had a man in the car doesn't mean anything. Claudia interacts with people regularly, but the idea that she kissed him, I'm convinced it's just your imagination. The woman looked at him and did not respond. She understood that without solid evidence, she wouldn't be able to convince him of anything. Senor Batista, you'll be discharged in a few days, and you'll need to hide, said Anna. But where? Pondered the man. I can rent a place to stay for a few months if you help me with that. Take the credit card from my wallet. I'll give you the PIN. Please find an apartment for me. Don't worry, I won't abandon you, the woman smiled. Take my old phone. It's risky to call from yours in case it's compromised. If you encounter any problems, call me immediately. My new number is saved there. Armando looked at her in surprise. Despite everything he had experienced, he still couldn't believe it wasn't just an elaborate prank and that he was truly in danger. After Anna left, Armando lost himself in thought. He mentally reviewed all his partners and competitors, wondering who might have betrayed him. However, none of them seemed to care about his fate. His suspicion then turned to his subordinates. Sameo could have done this, a thought crossed Armando's mind. We've worked together for years. He's reliable. I can't see his motive, though. Even if I accept the idea that he did this, what's his motive? To take over the factory? Armando tiredly rubbed his temples. His head was spinning, but he needed to continue this internal investigation. Let's consider Claudia and her mother, Armando sighed. They live comfortably, spending money without caring about what they're losing. They have everything. Claudia has a secret lover. After the passionate night we spent at the hotel, I doubt it. Maybe Anna saw someone. She recognized them kissing on the cheek, especially because it was already dark. In any case, I miss her so much. That was the most passionate night of our marriage. I finally understood how much Claudia loves me. She must be very worried about me. How do I let her know that I'm okay? I bet she's tried to call me hundreds of times. Armando was conflicted. He picked up the phone Anna had left and was about to make a call when he decided against it. Dear, I'm fine, don't worry, he sent a text message. A minute later, his phone rang. Despite Claudia's numerous attempts to reach him, he resisted answering. Then a message from her arrived. Armando, I'm losing my mind with worry. I'm going to the police. His wife sent another text, no need to involve the police. I'll find you when everything is resolved. He replied. Claudia tried calling Armando again, but he still didn't answer. The next day, Anna quickly found suitable accommodation, paid the landlord, and went straight to the hospital with the keys. She entered the room and noticed that Armando was awake now. "Anna, I believe the only person who could have done this is Simeo, my deputy," whispered Armando. "But I can't understand his motive." "Señor Batista, let's not jump to conclusions," Anna replied in a practical tone. "Tomorrow I'll pick you up and we'll move to your new apartment. We'll need to buy some new clothes for you, and I'll get a new wheelchair. I've already arranged that." "Thank you," Armando said with tears in his eyes. "You've saved me more than once." "It will be all right," she reassured him, stroking his head. "The important thing is that no one knows where you are right now. I believe we'll have some clues soon. We shouldn't report this to the police. At least they can protect me," the man offered. "I wouldn't put much hope in that," the woman responded coldly. "You can bribe anyone these days, there's no guarantee. However, I can't understand who I might have offended," sighed Armando. "I've never harmed anyone. I've never betrayed or had an affair with another man's wife. Why would someone be angry with me?" Late at night, Anna returned to her apartment and collapsed onto the bed. She didn't sleep for long, however, as the alarm went off at 8 a.m., and she began preparing for the day. She bought food and necessary items for Armando and finally managed to take him to his temporary residence. "This is our new home," Anna said as she maneuvered the wheelchair into the apartment. "It's a nice place with thresholds for you to move around easily. Just don't go too fast," she joked. "I used to live life in the fast lane in my wonderful big house, and now I'm in a wheelchair in a tiny apartment," Armando sighed. "Anna, thank you. I can't express how grateful I am. When all this is over, will you take me to a museum?" She laughed. "I've always enjoyed those outings with you." "I promise," Armando replied with a broad smile. "We'll visit the most fascinating museums." Anna prepared dinner. After enjoying the meal, she helped Armando get settled in bed and then retired to the sofa. "Finally, I can sleep. Tomorrow we'll figure out the next steps," she thought before falling asleep. The next day, Armando asked Anna to visit his factory. He had a trusted person there who could tell him about the real situation. Without hesitation, Anna left her boss to his tasks at the front desk. Anna gave the name of the trusted person to the security guard, and soon an elderly man appeared. Anna took him aside, explaining that she represented Señor Batista and asked about recent events at the factory. "Nothing out of the ordinary," the man replied, puzzled. "Everything at the factory is calm. Work continues as usual." "Is your deputy trustworthy?" Anna asked cautiously. "Simeo?" The man looked surprised. "I've worked for Señor Batista for many years and have never had problems with his deputy. He's a good man." After asking her questions and requesting that the conversation remain confidential for now, Anna went home. Meanwhile, Armando was alone, his mind in turmoil, torn between reporting to the police immediately and waiting a bit longer. He found himself fiddling with Anna's phone and eventually gave in to his secret desire. "Claudia, my love," he texted his wife, "I want you to know that I'm okay. I've missed you so much." "Armando, where are you?" an anxious voice responded immediately. "I almost lost my mother, and now I don't even know where you are." "Look, someone wanted to kill me," Armando said. "That's why I'm forced to hide for now. I suspect Simeo might have killed you," Claudia's voice trembled. A few days ago, a man called us in your name and said you would be away for a week or two and would call afterward. That's why I stayed calm and spent all these days with my mother, not worrying about you. And why did I leave you that night? I should have waited for you, and we could have gone back together. It's my fault again. I'm begging you, please tell me where you are. I promise no one will ever know. I'll only see you for a few minutes. Armando was in so much pain he couldn't bear it and gave Claudia his address. After the call, he contacted Anna and asked her to keep an eye on Samael for a while. In truth, he just didn't want her to find out that he had revealed his new address to his wife. For days, Armando missed Claudia intensely, constantly reminiscing about their last nights together. He felt his love for his wife intensifying, causing his body to tremble with anticipation for their reunion. Armando was in the kitchen when the doorbell rang. He answered and found two men who broke into the apartment. One of them injected something into Armando's arm, causing him to lose consciousness almost instantly. They quickly carried him away as if he were a piece of furniture. Anna was waiting outside the factory for 4 hours. She was freezing, but Samael never came out. Exhausted, she called Armando, but he didn't answer. After about 10 minutes, she tried calling him again. Anna became worried and called a taxi. She needed to get home quickly. The closer Anna got to the house, the more anxious she became. She paid the taxi driver and ran to the elevator. She rang the doorbell, but there was no answer. Standing in place, she instinctively tried the door handle and found it open. With trembling legs, she entered the apartment. Armando was nowhere to be found. The woman quickly grabbed the phone, intending to call the police. However, she decided against it and headed to her boss's house. I'm sure Claudia is involved in this. If they've killed him, they're probably trying to hide the evidence now, Anna reasoned. While I'm telling the police, they might just sweep everything under the rug, and the culprits will never be found. It was already dark, but Anna could see what was happening in Claudia's room because the curtains were open, revealing a male silhouette. Definitely not Armando, Anna whispered to herself. Who could be in the room given that the lights are off? It seems none of the workers are present. Gradually, some pieces of the puzzle began to fit together, but she still couldn't understand who the main villain in this story was. The woman called a taxi, paid the driver for the night, and prepared to wait. At 3 a.m., a car with Claudia and that strange man left Armando's house. The taxi driver and Anna followed them. Claudia stopped at a bridge with her passenger and got into an old, rusty car that was parked there. That car drove into the suburbs, and Anna and the taxi driver followed. Anna understood the danger of her surveillance but felt she had to take the risk again. However, she was so tense that she didn't even notice where they were going. After a few minutes, the driver dropped her off on a deserted street. She was very afraid to continue. Anna wandered through the dark streets, trying to hear the car. She felt the overwhelming fear that made her body tremble. The barking of dogs echoed in the distance. Eventually, she found herself on the edge of the suburbs. Suddenly, the headlights of a car lit up near a more distant house. Anna quickly hid behind the end of a brick wall, and the same old car passed by her. He must be there, she whispered to herself. But what should I do now? If they brought Armando here, there might be someone watching. They might even kill me too. Finally, she called the police. The officer reluctantly listened, promising someone would come. The woman wrapped herself in her raincoat and waited. An hour passed, then two, but no one came. At dawn, Anna called the police again. The same disgruntled voice informed her that the police were almost there. Cautiously, Anna began to walk towards the house. It was eerily quiet, and the surrounding houses seemed uninhabited. As she approached the gate, a large dog charged at her. She was lucky it was on a chain. Frightened, Anna decided to wait for the police. Chills ran down her body, and as she started to move, the dog barked even more. It pulled on the chain so hard that Anna feared it might break free. She finally spotted a police car in the distance. Paolo started dating Claudia when she turned 18. Paolo was resourceful and earned well, but only after a few years together did Claudia discover that Paolo was part of a gang. He never got his hands dirty but was involved in kidnappings, extortion, and intimidation. When the police got on their trail, criminal charges were made against many gang members. For about a month, they tried to negotiate with the police chief, but Paolo knew that even if they were released, they couldn't continue their previous lifestyle. Eventually, they would be caught. Paolo managed to secure his freedom by incriminating his accomplices and moving to the capital. The young couple, along with Sarah Jane, rented an apartment. They were cautious not to attract attention. Claudia got a job as a secretary and did well. Paolo worked as a driver, delivering goods to stores. A year later, it became evident that Paolo was not being pursued by his old accomplices, and he became more relaxed. "We can't live on our salary if we want a normal life," Paolo observed. "Especially since your mother can't work due to her thyroid condition." "Paolo, are you planning something risky?" "I almost lost you once," exclaimed Claudia in fear. "Why?" "There are so many people here it's unlikely we'll be found. And if we're careful, I'm sure we can do something." Sarah Jane always dreamed of a luxurious life, imagining a two-story beachfront house, an elegant car, and foreign sanatoriums for her thyroid treatment. She was indifferent about who would make her dream come true, so one day she suggested an idea. "Claudia, what if you got close to your boss? Of course, he's not a handsome man, but there's an advantage because he'd be honored to have a girl like you interested in him." "Mom, are you suggesting I have an affair with him? Are you crazy?" Sarah Jane was shocked. "What's the big deal?" her fiancé intervened. "It's only for a few months. We'll figure out a way to get money from him, and then we can have a good life. We could buy a beachfront house and live comfortably." "But how can you even consider that?" "I won't sleep with him," protested Claudia. "Claudia, you wouldn't be doing it for fun, but for our future," Paolo said. She looked at him with reproach, and she obeyed. It took a year for the girl to gain her boss's trust. There was still no relationship between them. Paolo and Sarah Jane had meticulously planned every step. But unexpectedly, Armando appeared on the scene. "What should I do with him now?" Claudia asked her boyfriend and mother. When Armando invited her out, "Claudia, you said he wasn't married." Sarah Jane's eyes sparkled. "And if you seduce him and marry him?" "That's too much," Claudia protested immediately. "I only love Paolo. I don't need anyone else." "Claudia, we're not breaking up. I love only you, and after that, we can finally get married officially." For the sake of our happiness, I agree to wait and endure, added Paolo. After the marriage, Paolo stayed in the apartment they rented while Claudia and her mother moved into Armando's house. For several years, they enjoyed life, spending Armando's money on their needs. Paolo bought a nice car, and after 3 years, they had a large house in the suburbs. The initial plan was to divorce Armando after extracting everything they could from him. However, the more they got from him, the more they wanted. Sarah Jane became so accustomed to being a housewife that she couldn't imagine herself without a maid, a cook, and other helpers. Paolo dressed in high-end boutique clothes, and Claudia denied herself no luxury. To avoid suspicion, Paolo suggested she set up a charity foundation and use most of the money to give to him. Moreover, working at the foundation provided Claudia with free time to spend with Paolo. "So we need to decide what to do next," Sarah Jane asked one day. "Should we stop with Armando?" She cast a sharp look at her daughter and lover, echoing Paolo's words, "We should eliminate him so that Claudia inherits everything. That would be convenient. But the question is how we arrange this." He sighed, "He's not a poor man, he can't just disappear." "Well, if everything is perfectly arranged, no one will suspect anything," Paolo reassured. Paolo didn't like the idea much. He would have preferred simply divorcing Armando. Even if he left her with nothing, they had already taken a lot from him. But when Armando offered to go somewhere on the weekend, an astute plan immediately came to the woman's mind. The plan proceeded better than expected. However, Armando didn't die, he remained unconscious. The scheme waited a few months to avoid suspicion about Armando's fate. After nearly 6 months, they began to devise a plan to finish what they had started. This time, they decided to stage it as if Armando had been kidnapped, injected with a drug that stopped his heart, and taken to the forest. His body was supposed to be found torn apart by wolves. It was mid-March, and hungry animals were prowling the forest for food. Everyone was so convinced of Armando's death that they only expected to find his bones. "Oh no, Mom, he's alive!" exclaimed Claudia, shocked, when she received a message from Armando. With trembling hands, she called Paolo. "I don't think anyone suspected anything," she said. "You spent the night at the hotel with Armando, then your mother had a heart attack and called you. Everyone saw it, the paramedics can confirm it, and you have the medical records. Also, they saw you spending days and nights by Sarah Jane's bed in the clinic. Nobody saw me there, it was a closed area, and the place was clean. The only potential problem was the cafe across the street from the hotel, but at that time it was closed. We wore masks, and none of us spoke. Besides, Armando was probably unconscious. The only thing I can't understand is how he survived if his heart stopped. Who brought him back to life?" Several days passed, and when Armando revealed his temporary hiding place to Claudia, Paolo immediately went after him. He had no trouble overpowering the defenseless Armando, taking him to the basement of one of the abandoned buildings on the outskirts of the city, and planned to finish his plan the next night. "I don't think he will last long in the basement, so we'll take him to the forest. There, the wolves will finish our job." "And if he's still alive?" asked Armando's wife with a scared voice. "We'll take him alive," the man replied. "We'll leave him in the deepest part of the forest. This time it will be done correctly." Armando woke up in a dark place, lying on the floor, and felt the dampness. He tried to get up but couldn't. After a while, his eyes adjusted, and he began to distinguish the walls. It seemed to be a basement or some other underground room. Armando tied the ground with his hands, unable to feel his legs, and managed to lean against the wall. Who are these people? Who could know where I was? Anna, she arranged all this? Armando's head throbbed with each question. Fear took over his body as he considered the possibility. But then, why would she save me? No, it couldn't have been Anna. Samael must have seen her at the factory and followed her, or maybe they're conspiring together. What are they planning? Are they planning to blackmail Claudia? Claudia, she should have visited me. Why didn't she come? Did I give the wrong address? Didn't I say everything right? Armando felt a penetrating cold. His whole body was cold. Why didn't Claudia come? Where is she? Why didn't she save me? Suddenly, a thought invaded his consciousness like an explosive wave. Claudia knew my exact address. She could have. Armando froze at the implications of his thoughts. They seemed confusing, but then clarity came. My wife did this, he said aloud. She knew where I was. If Anna wanted to kill me, she could have taken me straight here after the hospital. No one would have noticed my absence. Accepting this reality was hard for Armando. It meant that from the beginning, Claudia was pretending. She never loved him. The thought was so painful that Armando felt like his heart was going to explode from sadness. Meanwhile, Anna ran to the police car. It was so cold she could barely speak. Check that house, there's a big dog in the yard, the woman said with a trembling voice. I think they hid him there. The police cautiously approached the abandoned house. Despite the barking of the dog, one of them climbed the fence, out of the dog's reach, while the other followed. 10 minutes later, they emerged holding the ends of a blanket with Armando lying inside it like a stretcher. He was taken back to the hospital, where he and Anna testified for nearly 3 hours while the police documented everything. Finally, they summarized the situation. It seems that no one else knew about his whereabouts except his wife, the sergeant said. Anna also claims to have seen his wife with a man near the hotel and in the car that night. We'll return to that house. They probably won't show up during the day, but they'll be there at night. We'll wait there. Please avoid calling anyone until we have a better understanding of the situation. The police left, leaving Armando and his assistant alone. The man was filled with remorse. Anna, I'm sorry. All of this is my fault, Armando confessed. Initially, I lost patience and sent a message to my wife. Then, while you were at the factory watching Samael, I found her and asked her to come. I suspected her from the beginning. Thank God I found you. It's a stroke of luck that I went straight to your house and followed that car. You've already rescued me twice. Thank you. Tears streamed down Armando's face. You were sent by God. It was wise of me to defend you with Sarah Jane and keep you. I can't imagine what would have happened if I hadn't hired you back then. Anna looked at him. She too had endured a lot in recent days. She approached her employer and hugged him, causing her own tears due to stress. At midnight, a car stopped at the abandoned house. 2 men emerged, one of whom threw a piece of meat to calm the barking dog. They made their way to the house, carefully descending into the basement. Near the entrance, a flashlight was turned on, illuminating an empty room. Terrified, Paolo tried to flee, only to be confronted by 3 police officers. "Hands up," said one, aiming his gun. "Don't move. You won't escape." The case of Armando continued for months, and eventually, Claudia, her mother, and Paolo were sentenced to different penalties. After Armando returned home, his life also began to change. The first thing he realistically looked at was his health, and since there was no positive prognosis, he decided to sell his factory. Sameo and another employee bought it in installments. "I'm happy that my creation will be in your hands," Armando confessed to his former colleagues. "I'm sure that in a few years, you'll achieve much more than I once did." Despite the sadness of losing his company, after a few months, Armando sighed calmly. He had enough money for a long and prosperous life, but the most important thing Armando took from the whole story was a reliable and loyal friend. He had promised to keep his promise. "Anna, what do you think of this painting?" The man stopped near the blue ballerinas. "What stunning colors! I love this painting." Anna took Armando's hand, her eyes fixed on the captivating figures of girls in blue dresses. Armando was no longer just her employer, he had become a dear friend and companion. However, Armando hesitated to propose to Anna, fearing she might want someone better than a man with a disability. One day, he gathered the courage to express his affection. "Anna, you mean so much to me, and I'm terrified of losing you." "I love you," Armando asked. "Will you marry me?" Anna responded with a smile, "Let's not complicate things. If I'm dear to you, let's not make excuses to separate. I love you too." "Yes." They believed that their shared trials had strengthened their bond and that no circumstance could separate them. Anna did everything possible to ensure that Armando never disconnected from life. They visited many places together, and when they had a daughter, Armando finally understood what it meant to have a family. Disability only limits you when you allow it. "I have more opportunities than I used to say," Armando said. I hope you enjoyed the short story. Comment and share. Thank you for watching.